Jones, look at that balance. Here comes the Cardinal blitz. Geno Smith, light spiral, intercepted by Tyler. We're back.
Well, it's Monday night, a new week has begun. I turn on my TV for some chicken fun. I see a Super Bowl season here. The biggest game each week is there.
The touchdown, we saw Philip Lindsay come off the field indicating an issue with his right hand. You can see right there.
Are you ready? Are you ready? Are you ready? We're ready. Are you ready for some football? A Monday night party. Hey, this is rockin' random, Hank. Ready to get the good time started.
Welcome back to the second season of Are You Ready for a Podcast, the official podcast of the Are You Ready for Some Football Fantasy Football League. I am your co-commissioner and defending champ, Joe. I'm joined by Parker. Parker, how's it going?
It's good, Joe. We got a new season. We have some optimism, to something to look forward to.
I agree. And well, just before we get into the draft and the power rankings, just quickly, like how the podcast is going to work. It's going to be a little bit different this year. I'm probably going to lead most of this because I'm going to be here every week. Parker will be in and out with his residency. And like this podcast will probably function like the ones last year, but some of them I'll probably be lazy if I'm hosting by myself and just like share my screen and kind of go through things. They'll probably be a little shorter. We'll still get a guest on every week, but yeah, so it'll just be a little bit different depending on what Parker's schedule is. But yeah, so it was a good draft. We were able to draft back mostly in person this year. And yeah, so we'll start right there again. We'll go alphabetically, and we'll start with Austin. And Austin is coming off of a last place regular season, or was he 11th regular season? But then was able to finish 8th, I think, overall. You know, did well in the Haney Cup. And I really like Austin's team this year. I think he's relying on a lot of bounce backs. He's relying on guys like DK and Terry and Tyreek to bounce back, you know, Cam Akers to continue coming off of that Achilles. But, you know, I think he took some risks. I love Kamara. I love taking the risk on Trey Lance. You know, betting on a Michael Thomas comeback. And then I like what he did on his bench with Tony and Mostert and Pickens. So yeah, I do like Austin's team quite a bit. I didn't really like it after the draft last year, but I thought he did a lot better job this year. What do you think, Parker?
I agree. I think I like it better than I did his team post-draft last year. You know, when I look through his roster, there isn't anything that really sticks out to me as a huge strength, but there's nothing that sticks out as a huge weakness. I kind of have him as like a, you know, maybe like if I'm doing letter grades, which is what I did, I have him essentially at B or so across the board. I think, you know, quarterback, running back, wide receiver, nothing sticks out as a tremendous strength. You know, I mean, you could say Goddard's probably below average tight end. You could say Kamara is probably above average running back one. But overall, just solid, good depth. Maybe not the highest ceiling, but I think this team has a pretty good floor. So yeah, I like it better than last year. I think I would say nothing really stuck out to me as amazing value that he got, but didn't overspend anywhere either. And I do like the addition of Ayuk to the end of his bench as well.
Well, yeah. It was a good Brandon Ayuk at the end of his bench was a great draft pick. I think he's going to do big things for him this season, and I'm just looking forward to seeing that. And yeah, so he was able to pick up Brandon Ayuk, and that he picked up Brandon Ayuk because of our next team, which was Ben. Which I mean, where do we start? He essentially only spent $160 because he spent a bunch of money that he didn't need to spend on DeAndre Hopkins at the end of the draft. I don't know anywhere on the roster outside of Kyle Pitts, and maybe if you want to talk yourself into James Conner, where you like where you're at. I mean, I guess the bench is good because like it has to be good because your starting lineup is terrible. Like you have a low end quarterback one, you have a low end running back one, you have a low end running back two, you have flexes as your two wide receivers, you have a good tight end, and then you just have kind of whatever standard flexes for your other two for your actual flex spots. So we're gonna get Ben on later. I think he's a little more bullish on the team. I don't see how, but it's a long season, I guess. Anything can happen.
Yeah, I agree. I'm not the highest on Ben's team either. I think that a lot of people kind of questioned during the draft whenever he was holding and holding and holding and not jumping in. I think that I think here his philosophy is let me build depth. It's a long season. And then, late in the season, maybe make a push as other guys get hurt. If you have a little more depth than other teams, that's maybe a decent idea, but I think he held off too long on spending money. He just waited and waited and waited, and sort of got caught holding the bag at the end whenever he had too much money. So he could have jumped in and started spending that money a little bit earlier and still had great depth, in my opinion. So I agree with you. I don't, I think it's hard whenever you say you're probably a little weak at running back and receiver. It's going to be really hard to compete with a team like that. So I agree with you. Not my favorite team.
Yeah. I just, he and we didn't like his team last year and he almost made the playoffs. So like obviously anything can happen, but I'm not too bullish on it. We'll move on to Colin.
Real quick, are we doing letter grades or do you want to just
I gave grades. So I gave Austin a B and I gave Ben a D. What about you?
I gave Austin a B and I'll give Ben a C-.
Okay, fair enough. So we'll move on to Colin. Colin had, led the league in scoring last year, had a great year after I picked him last in the preseason and Parker had him 11th or something like that. So he proved all the doubters wrong, scored 200 points in a game, set the single game scoring record. He came back this year and he's trying to run it back with a couple of the guys on that team and Josh Allen and Austin Eckler. I like that. That's a good foundation to start with. David Montgomery is a running back too, is fine. I do really like the plays he took at wide receiver. He doesn't have like the high marquee guys, but I do like it's two young guys that have a lot to prove. Marquise Brown and Amon-Ra St. Brown. He got a top 2 tight end in Mark Andrews. Falls, I don't love the flexes. And then so he the big one of the big moments of the draft was Colin spending $15 on Patrick Mahomes, which will be his backup quarterback as of right now. We do not play in a 2 quarterback or super flex league. So Patrick Mahomes, until he trades him, is just riding his bench, one of the 5 best quarterbacks in fantasy. We'll see what Colin does with that, but as of right now, he is a useless player on his bench. But I do like what Colin did. He just has to turn Mahomes into something. He also spent up on Hawkinson, so he's backup tight end. You can play 2 tight ends, obviously. Really, nobody does. So if he can turn those 2 guys into something, trade value has Mahomes at a 19.5 and Hawkinson at a 10.5. So I think he could turn those 2 guys into something, and I would like it more down the road. Right now, I think it's solid. I give him a B-.
Yeah, I mean, I think I again agree with a lot of what you said. I don't think I like the receivers near as much as you do. I think Marquise Brown and Amon-Ra St. Brown is a bottom tier receiving duo in the league, and then I don't really like his depth receivers either. Claypool, Lockett. I have a lot of questions about those guys and the offenses that they're on. So I don't love his receiving core. I like his starting running backs, but he doesn't have a whole lot of depth there, which raises a concern for me as well. So I think it's okay. I mean, I think that if he can get some value from Mahomes, it will be good. And then he's obviously got the best quarterback and the best tight end in the league. So I still give him a B, but I do have a lot of questions about the wide receivers.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's fair, but I think that Marquise Brown without Hopkins for the first 6 weeks with his connection with Kyler is really good, and Amon-Ra, like second-year receivers are good. They're a good thing to invest in to be able to break out, and Amon-Ra had a great end of last year. So wait, did you say your grade?
Yeah, I said B.
Okay. So we'll move on to Dan. Dan did a little bit of the Ben Light strategy. Ben waited a really long time to get guys, which I disagreed with because he just didn't have enough money to spend. Dan, a little bit of the same, not nearly as egregious. Spent up on Jamar and Kelsey to start the draft, but waited and waited and waited for a while. He has the worst running backs in the league. Do not like really either of those guys, as they'd be low in running back twos for me, and he's going to have one of them as running back one. That's Elijah Mitchell and Damian Harris. And he has not as good of receivers as you would want for a team with that bad of running backs. Like, obviously Jamar's a stud, but Godwin's not healthy to start the year. Thielen is getting older. He's got a great bench. He's got Kelsey, who is my number one tight end. And then Joe Burrow's a whatever quarterback. So don't really love what Dan did. But Dan does do really good do really well during the regular season. He's got a really deep team. His bench trade value is a lot higher than every other team's bench. So maybe he can turn that into stuff, or if a couple guys on his bench end up really hitting, then his team will end up being a lot better. But right now I don't love it. I give him a C-.
I'm with you. Best bench in the league, but I'm really low on his running backs, and he's got to do something with that. And his receivers are also underwhelming. When we talked about it a little bit with Ben, it's so hard if your running backs and your receivers are both weak spots. He's got Travis Kelce and Darren Waller, so he's got a little bit too much invested in tight end and not enough in running back and receiver for my liking. So I'm with you. I got him at a C.
Yeah, I think that's perfectly fair. And like with Waller, that I mentioned with Colin how most teams don't start a second tight end. You can easily do that with Waller. So, I don't mind the investment in that, but yeah, generally I would prefer to spend it on a receiver or have not spent that money and been able to get a better running back. So we'll move on to Grant. Grant is two-time champ, dethroned by his three-peat was ended by me by just 1 point in the championship last year. Has been the most successful team in the league the last few years. And he comes into the draft with a ton of pedigree. And, we kind of doubted him last year. I think I had him at 6 in the preseason. You had him at 7. And he ended up being by far the number 1 seed at 12-2. I think I'm going to do it again. I think the team is fine, but it's kind of right in that range again for me of, the fringe playoff team. Leonard Fournette as running back 1 is like about as low end running back 1 as I get. I don't like Nick Chubb really this year. I get that he's like a good running back 2, like if he's your running back 2, but he's a non-pass catching back on a pretty bad offense, I think. And then, the receivers are pretty good. DJ Moore and Courtland Sutton. Courtland Sutton's a lot of people's breakout candidate. Lamar Jackson's obviously really good. Cole Kmet's a good sleeper tight end. The running backs or the flexes with Dobbins and Clyde. I guess we'll see. I don't know. Those are pretty high risk. Clyde could get benched for Pacheco or one of these other guys, and J.K. Dobbins still isn't 100%. Bench is okay. Like, I'm just not really inspired by this team. Nothing really sticks out to me other than like Courtland Sutton, who I really like. And yeah, so I gave him a B-. I'm kind of right there with how I feel about Colin's team. And he's kind of a fringe playoff team for me right now.
We differ on this one a little bit. I really like some of the guys he picked this year. I'm really high on Lamar, really high on Courtland Sutton. Nick Chubb, I think, is fine as a running back 2. I think he's probably above average as a running back 2. He maybe doesn't have the ceiling since we don't play, or since we do have half PPR and he doesn't really catch passes. But I think that they're going to try and run the ball a ton this year. And so I don't think it's, the best team in the league or really even close, but I think that it's a really solid job. And I'm definitely high on his team. I got him at a B+.
Okay. Yeah, like honestly, like it's probably smart to give Grant the benefit of the doubt, like because he's been so successful. But it just kind of leaves me wanting a little more.
Mainly, I'm really high on Sutton. I think Sutton will be a low end wide receiver 1, and I think Lamar playing in his contract year, he's pissed.
Yeah, no, those are probably my 2 favorite picks of his.
Yeah, I think those 2 guys are really, really good value, and I think he's going to be good
Yeah. So our next person is Hunter. He was your number one overall, or your number one in the power rankings last year for you. He was like number 4 for me, I think. Had just brutal injury luck, and was able to rob Ben, and that Cooper Kupp trade didn't really matter. Still missed the playoffs. Came back this year, and I loved his draft. I thought he did a great job. I mean, Derrick Henry is running back 1. If he was well on his way to being the best running back in fantasy before he broke his foot. Aaron Jones, I love as a running back 2. I like Aaron Jones as a running back 1 a lot, and so Aaron Jones as a running back 2 is unbelievable to me. Justin Jefferson is the number 2 receiver in fantasy. Gabe Davis, I love as a breakout candidate. Kyler is a top 5 quarterback, and Josh Jacobs is solid. After that, I don't, there's nothing much he could do. Nyheim Hines is a solid pass catching running back. So I don't love his bench, but that's because he put so much into, his top 5 guys. And I love his top 5 guys. And, I trust Hunter to make good decisions throughout the year. And I think he went about this draft really smartly. So I gave him an A-.
I gave him an A- as well. I really am all over this team. Like you said, there's top 4 guys, and we don't need to reiterate, but just elite throughout there. And so if he can get anything off the waiver wire for his flex spots, he should be fine. So I think this is a really good team. Definitely one of the best teams in the league.
Yeah. So we'll move on to me trying to defend my championship. I took a completely different draft strategy than I did last year. Last year, I waited for a while and then got a bunch of depth. Ended up working out because I, snuck in the playoffs and then won. This year, I went a lot riskier. I spent up on McCaffrey, spent like the $68 or whatever. I'm just gonna hope to God he does not get injured again. Spent for Travis Etienne. I really like him. Pass catching running back. It'll be a bad offense, but you want if you're in a bad, or I don't know how bad their offense will be, but they'll be a bad team. And if you want a guy on a bad team or a running back, then you want him to be a pass catcher with some prior experience with Trevor Lawrence. CD, I'm just going to hope that all those vacated targets, that enough of them go to him. I stacked him with Dak. And then Michael Pittman, I really like a lot. My flexes, weren't really targets coming into the draft, but they just kind of felt like good values at the time. So, I spent the money and then nobody outbid me. And then the bench, I don't like at all. So it's really opposite of what I did last year. I still really like my starting lineup, but I don't like my team overall as much as some other teams. I gave myself a B+.
We're going to end up at the same grade. I give you a B+ too, but I'm just going to have a more positive tone about it, which is similar thing to what I've done on a few teams now. We end up with the same letter grade somehow. But I like it. I mean, I really like McCaffrey. He's my number 1 player for this year. I like Etienne as a running back too. I think the receivers are obviously elite. And I don't think your bench is as bad as you say. You got some high upside running backs, which is, the most important thing to have on your bench. And you already have enough decent flex options that you shouldn't really need the depth, at least at the beginning of the season. So I like the team B+ for me.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think I'm just trying to, I'm generally pretty comfortable with how lucky I get in fantasy and all that, but like Etienne and McCaffrey both coming off injuries, and just it scares me a little bit, and I don't love my running back depth. But we'll move on to Morgan. I guess included in this Morgan and actually it works out because Morgan and Nick are the next 2, and they made the big trade. So we'll get into that as we talk about their teams. So Morgan went very wide receiver heavy. Drafted Devontae Adams and AJ Brown, and did he draft T? Was that in the trade?
That was in the trade.
Yeah, and Mike Williams. Ended up trading all 3 of them, but went very wide receiver heavy. Also got Rashad Bateman. I've talked myself a little bit more into Morgan's team after the draft. After the draft, I didn't like it a lot. This right now, I'm okay with it. Najee as a running back 1 is fine. Like, he's a solid running back 1. I don't think that has a ton of upside. Then he traded for Dameon Pierce. He had a really good preseason. It just scares me a lot because I've kind of hammered this a few times during this podcast, but we don't know if he's a pass catching running back. It kind of seems like that's Rex Burkhead on a bad offense. Scares me a little bit, but he certainly does have some upside. Other than that, like he's running back with Dawson Knox. Jalen Hurts is a really good quarterback, a really good fantasy quarterback, I should say. I don't like his bench at all, but again, that's more minor. And then he's got solid receivers. I don't know if he has the best receivers. Well, he definitely doesn't have the best receivers. So we'll get to Nick. So yeah, I gave him a B-. I think he's right on that fringe with Grant, kind of in that range.
I am a little bit. I'm on the same page as you, but maybe a little bit lower on his team. I am not really convinced on Najee as a running back one, and I don't really love Debo either, which is I think why I'm maybe a little bit lower. I do think he has great wide receiver depth, which is an asset, but I'm not sure that he's really, really elite anywhere. And so for that reason, I'm not super high on him. But I have him at a C+.
Yeah.
Following the trade, I got him at a C+.
Okay. Yeah. I kind of thought it was I thought it was a pretty mutually beneficial trade because Morgan really needed a running back.
I agree.
Yeah. So speaking of the trade, we'll move on to Nick. So last year I had him as my number one in the power rankings preseason. He ended up finishing third. After a little bit of a rough start to the season, he kind of repeated his strategy. He went heavy on receivers again. And once again, I love Nick's team. I think I'm higher on Zeke. I think that most people, I don't have him as a running back one, but I think he's a really solid running back. AJ Dillon, I really like too. I think he could end up being a running back too. Like him and Aaron Jones, I think are going to get a ton of work. And then with the trade with Morgan, he upgraded it at so many positions. He upgraded or at so many of his wide receivers. He upgraded from Debo to Devontae. T and AJ Brown, I think, is about a wash, and then or he upgraded from that was it. And then I really like Mike Williams. So yeah, I really like my Knicks team. Has some okay options. Also got McKissick from Oregon, who, now that again with Brian Robinson's situation, I think becomes a little more valuable. And I think his bench is solid. I think pretty good running backs, awesome receivers, great quarterback. Yeah, that's right. He upgraded from Jalen Hurts to Justin Herbert. Really solid tight end. So really don't see many flaws in Nick's team. I have him at an A.
I have him at an A-. I think, to me, the place that I probably disagree with you a little bit is on the running backs. I'm not sold on Zeke as he's a low-end running back one, and I think A.J. Dillon is kind of a low-end running back two. I'm not super sold. I think Aaron Jones is going to be involved in the passing game and in the red zone, and might take a lot of A.J. Dillon's value in that way. But I do love everything else. The receivers, obviously, a huge plus. He's got the stack with Herbert and Mike Williams. He's also got a stack of Dalton Schultz and Zeke in his starting lineup, which I'm not super thrilled about, but high upside bench. So really, really good job. I'm just probably a little bit lower on the running backs than you. I gave him an A- as well. Or did you say A?
I said A. Yeah. I think he just picked Dalton Schultz because that was a little PTSD from him knocking him out of the playoffs last year. So we'll move on to you, and I'll let you start with your team.
Well, overall, I'm happy with it. I kind of went off script for the draft. I wasn't expecting to spend all my money instantly on Jonathan Taylor and Cooper Kupp. But it is comforting to have an elite running back and an elite wide receiver option. Some people would have them. I have them at my second best running back and my second best receiver, but some people would have them at one for each of those positions. So I'm obviously happy with that. And I think I filled everything out okay. Obviously, running back two is a question mark, but you're going to have some question marks with that. But I think Russell Wilson, above average quarterback. I got Kittle, who's an above average tight end. And so it's just going to be about finding the flexes and the depth, which will be more of an in-season management thing. But I think really high upside. Obviously, not much depth is scary, but I came out pretty happy with it. I had B pluses for my team across the board at every position, so overall that's a B plus to me.
Yeah, I think you did what I like, the better version of kind of what I was trying to do. And honestly, like forgetting the running back one and the wide receiver one from last year, who are, I think, the safest running back and wide receiver for this year. Forgetting both of those guys, two top four guys. I think like the rest of the team is really good. If you factor that in. So I think Chase Edmonds is a good running back too. You know, since you got Jonathan Taylor, I think Brandon Cooks I love as a wide receiver too. Just absolutely love him. Kittle is a good tight end. You know, maybe you worry a little bit with Trey Lance there and how many guys he can sustain production for, but overall I think that's good. And then the flexes, I really like Allen Lazard, and Devin Singletary's fine. You know, again, your bench, and again, I think for what you were dealing with no money, like your bench is good for that. So, you know, I think you did a really good job with the draft, and I give you an A.
All right.
Okay, so we'll move on to Thomas. Got two teams left. So Thomas, you know, did kind of the opposite of what Nick did with the wide receiver heavy. Thomas went super running back heavy, spent essentially all of his money on 4 running backs. And I think that's a really, really good strategy to take. Obviously, running back depth is a huge asset to have in the league. And I think he got 4 good ones. I like Joe Mixon. I like DeAndre Swift. I like Javonte Williams. And I think Breece Hall will really come along as the season goes. So I would be really happy with that. And then again, like I was saying for you, for spending all of his money on 4 guys, I think he did awesome with his 2 receivers. I think Allen Robinson and Juju, I think are primed for huge bounce back seasons with much improved quarterback play for both of them. Got Brady, who obviously throws a million touchdowns. His bench is terrible, but you know, what are you going to do? Like, you can obviously improve that. I know we kind of toss that aside for a lot of people, but that is the easiest thing to improve. So, yeah, I think Thomas did a great job as well. I gave Thomas an A minus.
I had him at B plus. I agree with you about the lineup. Running backs obviously really good, and I love good running back builds. So that's kind of what kept him at a B plus for me. I'm probably, and I like his receivers. I'm probably a little lower on Allen Robinson. I'm not super convinced of his role. I kind of need to see it with him. He looked so bad last year. And then, you know, the bench, like you said, his bench is obviously bad, and it obviously is, but I think that's sort of understating it. His bench is an abject disaster. I'm not certain that there's anyone on his bench that you could even play confidently if you want to. And he could cut his entire bench, and it'd probably be a very similar team, in my opinion.
It is a fair point, because last year he had a great starting lineup and a terrible bench, and then he had guys get hurt, and his team kind of fell apart. So that is a valid point.
Yeah, I mean, he's gonna have bye weeks, and he doesn't even have, like, you know, if one guy's on bye, he's essentially taking a 0 with the way his bench looks. So, you know, from that standpoint, obviously that's a problem, but I do like his team overall. And so I gave him a B plus.
Yeah, I think that's fair. And so we will move on. Our final team is Zach. So Zach spent, you know, Zach kind of went stars and scrubs too, kind of like he did last year. And he spent up for 2 of my favorite guys, or at their value, which was Dalvin Cook and Stephon Diggs. Love those 2 picks to start. Saquon I'm fine with, obviously a good running back too, if he can stay healthy, and if the Giants use him a lot better than they did last year and their offense improves. But then kind of after that, like, so I think that's a great start. And then kind of after that, I don't love it. I don't love Deontay Johnson this year. Don't love Mike Gesicki this year. Although, I mean, like, I guess $1 tight ends don't really matter. You know, Antonio Gibson, I didn't like, but I guess, you know, with Brian Robinson out indefinitely, we'll see. And then I don't like any of his flex 2 options. I guess it would maybe be Rondale or Romeo Dubes, maybe Garrett Wilson. I don't really like any of those options. So and then Rodgers is a lower end quarterback. So it kind of fell off for me there, but I do think it was a strong start. I'll give Zach a B minus. Again, he's kind of in that territory with Grant and Morgan and Colin for me.
I give him a B. I think I really like Dalvin and Diggs, and so that's what keeps him at a B for me. Barkley, obviously a good running back too. I owned him for a little bit last year. I mean, I rostered him for a little bit last year, and it was a little bit. He's not a fun player to have on your team always, but he's got that elite talent at the top, and then I like what he did with taking high upside guys everywhere else, and then the Antonio Gibson gives him a nice little bump. So I've got him at a B. I like the upside on his bench, and I like the top end of his team. The sort of middle line filler starter guys are questionable to me for now. So we will have to keep an eye on that. I think it's, I think it's okay, but he's a little bit precarious with where he's at. If he misses on some of those bench guys, I think he could have another rough season. Probably not as rough as last year, but could be another rough season.
Yeah, you bring that up. Just got off to the 0-6 start, I believe, and had like 3 different brutal losses. So if things even out a little bit more, then Zach should be pretty good this year.
0-8 start last year.
0-8. Oh, and then he beat you. Yeah. So we'll move on to the power rankings. Again, kind of a point of contention last year. We disagreed a lot about Hunter's team last year. We disagreed a fair amount about Nick and Thomas a little bit. So looking forward to it again this year. Just a little preface, because we'll get into this kind of as we go through the teams. We really don't know shit. I had Colin at 12, Parker had Colin at 10, and we both picked him to win the Haney. And then Colin led the league in scoring and had a great year. Came in 4th, but set the league scoring record. I think we both each got 3 playoff teams right and 3 wrong. So don't take too great of offense. I know Dan is still going to make clips or whatever, but yeah, so we'll move on. I guess we'll go 12 through 1 if that's cool.
Yeah.
And so who's your number 12 team? I can't imagine who it is.
So for me, it's Ben, and I imagine that yours will be as well. I think that he just waited too long, just doesn't have the top end starters of everyone else. I think he's got a top 3 option at tight end, and then really nowhere else. Does he even have a top 6 option at the position, even a top 10 option at the position? So for that reason, I've got Ben at 12.
Yeah, I've got to agree. Can't really. I think we've said our piece. Just don't really see it outside of Kyle Pitts, and that is not enough. So we'll move on to 11. I think I did a good job drafting, because I of drafting rivals for this year, because I have Dan at 11. I think it's similar, just not as bad as what Ben did, and don't love the running backs at all. Don't love the receivers outside of Jamar. Burrow is kind of an average fantasy quarterback. So it's really Jamar and Kelsey for me, and that's not enough. So who do you have at 11?
I've got Dan as well. I think that, both Ben and Dan tried to sort of emulate the strategy that won you a championship last year, which is sit tight, hold, wait for value, and try to, capitalize and fill in your roster with great depth. And oftentimes that strategy leaves you with a team that looks a little bit lacking following draft day, because it's hard for us to account for injuries and bye weeks and things like that when we look at the teams. But I also think that it kind of limits your upside in a way. And obviously last year you were able to win the championship with it, but you also, it's easy to forget, barely snuck into the playoffs. And so, you needed tiebreakers to get into the playoffs. And so I think that it's going to be difficult holding and waiting on good value to end up with an elite top end team on draft day. And so I think that's sort of what hurt both Ben and Dan.
Yeah, I agree. They just waited too long, because once I waited for a while, but once I started spending a lot and got a lot of those kind of $25 to $35 guys, they didn't quite do that. So we'll move on to number 10. I really quibbled a lot with 7 through 10. It was really close for me. I had 4 teams at a B- that I was differentiating between. So I came with Zach. We just talked about it. Just again, I love Diggs and Dalvin, but again, like I like Jamar a lot, and I like Kelsey a lot for Dan's team, and that didn't do enough for me. So two guys doesn't really make a team for me. And so yeah, he's gonna have to do a little bit of work, I think, during the season. So who's your 10?
10 for me is Morgan. I think that his running backs were such a question mark after the draft, and the trade to get Pierce, makes me feel a little bit better, but he gave up value elsewhere. I think Nick won the trade overall. I think Herbert, I was confident on him when he had Herbert, and now he loses that. And so I don't know. I don't love his running backs. And I don't really see his receivers aren't elite enough to make up for it. So I got Morgan at 10.
Yeah, I mean, I got Morgan at 9. I think it's pretty close between him and Zach and my number 8 team. Agree with a lot of what you said, but I do like the swing he took on Pierce, but getting downgrading to Debo, like that's kind of tough. Downgrading to Jalen Hurts, even though I do like Jalen Hurts, he just had a much safer option, I think, with Herbert, and yeah, so I think he could certainly make a push. I think if he's aggressive on the waiver wire. I remember I talked about this a couple of days ago. He said as soon as that first running back injury hits and there's a valuable backup on the waiver wire, he's going to go hard after him. So if he does that, I think his team could end up working out really well. But as of right now, I agree. I have him out of the playoffs. So who is your number 9?
We have the same bottom 4 once again. We didn't directly discuss our rankings with each other ahead of time. We did talk about how we thought about different teams, but for me, it's Zach. This is one that I don't feel good about. I don't look at his team and think, man, 9th best team in the league. But I think he's just got enough question marks that I have him down there. I like his high-end players, and I like the gambles he's taking on his bench, but they still are gambles on his bench with Rondale Moore, Garrett Wilson, Romeo Doubs, Jahan Dotson. So he's going to need one of those guys to hit pretty big, I think, for his team to be one of the top 3 or 4 teams in the league. And so that's why I've got him down at 9.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Good arguments. And at 8, I think I'm going to keep giving him whiteboard material. He's going to probably keep proving me wrong. I've got Grant. I think it's a fine team. Again, it's pretty close between 7th or 10, but I think it seems fine. But I don't love Fournette's upside this year. I think his pass catching comes down. I don't love Chubb's upside. Again, I think he's got a bunch of high floor guys. I don't really see the ceiling on a lot of these guys. And then he did, I guess we didn't talk about this. He did stack Dobbins and Lamar. So I think that would be that kind of interferes with each other's production there. So yeah, again, he'll probably end up proving me wrong, but I just don't quite see it. I do like his team, or I do like his floor. I just don't love the upside.
My number 8 team is Colin. I just don't like his receivers. That's the main thing for me. And I came out of the draft like, wow, Colin actually built a decent team despite spending all that money on quarterbacks. But the more I think about it, the more I just think that, his receivers are probably one of the worst. It looks like on mine, him and Ben are the worst receiving cores in the league. And with the way football runs in 2022, receivers are a huge portion of the points. I do like his running backs, which makes me feel weird about ranking him where I am, but I've got Colin at number 8.
Yeah, I've got Colin at 7. I still think he's got pretty good upside with Allen and Eckler, and I think especially these first 6 weeks, I think Hollywood and Amon-Ra could really break out. Mark Andrews is great. So yeah, I do like a lot of I do like his receivers more than you do. And then I guess this is a little bit of benefit of the doubt. Like he's got to trade Mahomes at some point. So he'll get something for that. He'll get maybe a flex guy for that, because I don't really love Lockett or London too much. But yeah, I think Colin, again, pretty good team. Just out of my playoff picture. I could have easily put him at 10 as 7. kind of it's tough with these. A lot of these teams are really close together, but yeah, I trust Colin to end season manage and turn Mahomes into something. So who's your 7?
7 for me is a team that I feel like is solid everywhere, but spectacular nowhere, and that kind of earns you a middle of the pack ranking. You know, steady, solid all over. Could be a playoff team, but probably won't be the number 1 seed. For me, that's Austin. I've got him at 7. I don't think he got bad value at the draft, but nothing sticks out to me as elite. So 7.
Okay. I mean, we're just way too similar because I have Austin at 6. Yeah, I kind of I like some of the chances he took on these bounce back guys. I think DK and Terry were a little undervalued. You know, I think a lot of his season will hinge heavily on Cam Akers because he does not have really a third running back option as of right now. You know, it'd be Mostert or Algier. And so, but I do like some of the chances he took, and I just, kind of stacking it up with Grant's team and Colin's team. I kind of looked throughout, and I'm also expecting like a big Trey Lance breakout. So I kind of like Austin's team a little bit more. I've got Austin as my 6th playoff team.
The 6th playoff team for me is myself. I know that you will probably disagree, but I really tried to be fair here, and I think that I do like my team, but I don't think I have any position groups that are really among the best in the league. And I have some questions on my depth. So it's a little bit, I'd say my team is a similar build to Austin's, except I like my running back 1 and my wide receiver 1 a little bit more. So that puts me at 6.
Yeah, I mean, I guess we're both fairly low on our teams compared to each other because I have me at 5. I'm a little more nervous. I think I have number 1 team upside potentially. I would need a fair amount of things to break right for me and guys to stay healthy, but I do think I have great upside. I think I have a pretty low floor though too, and so I kind of settle at myself at 5. Got to improve the bench so I have better starting options for when guys go down. I need McCaffrey and Etienne to stay healthy, and if they do, then I think my team could be really good. I like a few teams more right now, so I will place myself at 5. Who's your 5?
You're also my 5. I agree with your assessment. I think your wide receiver group obviously is a big strength, but as much as I like the 2 guys you picked at running backs, they do have questions about them, particularly their health. And they're both on bad teams, and I have some questions about the depth as well. So I got you at 5. The receivers bring you up, but nothing else has really stand out to me. So I agree with that ranking.
Yeah. So we'll move on. I've got Thomas at 4. I had him at 5 last year. You got him at 3. So we've been very high on his past 2 drafts. Again, I think running back depth it's such a big thing. And he can turn that into something if he wants to. He can turn that into a really good receiver potentially. And yeah, so I think that gives him a lot of options. I like his receivers more than you do, especially for how strong his running backs are. Yeah, the bench is terrible, like we mentioned, but yeah, I think he's that's 2 drops in a row where he's done a really good job. He just needs injury luck and for his team not to fall apart again. So who's your 4?
My 4 is a team that we disagree on the most, which is Grant. I think that his running backs are okay, which is obviously your big question mark. And then I really like his receivers. I really like Lamar at quarterback. And I like what he did building depth. He's shown time and again in recent years that he is the team to beat in the league when it comes to the regular season and the playoffs. He's been to the championship 3 straight years, won it the last 2 before last year. So yeah, Grant at 4 for me.
Okay. My number 3 is Hunter. I think the top 3 is all really close. Could make an argument for all 3. Hunter doesn't have great depth, but he's got such a good top 4. And then a great quarterback and 1 okay flex option. So if that top four can carry him, far enough into being able to make good pickups or make a trade here, then I think Hunter is very primed to potentially end his long drought of never winning a championship, 4-time runner-up. I think he's put himself in a great position to end his championship-less drought this season.
I have Thomas at 3. I really like teams with strong running backs. I agree with you. If he wants to, he can cash that in for receivers. But I really like his receiver duo that he's got with Allen Robinson and Juju. Considering the strength at his running back position, really, really good job in the draft. He is going to have to do something about his tight end because I think that Ertz is questionable to play, and then his bench obviously a disaster. But I got Thomas at 3.
Yeah. I guess we disagree heavily on Grant. We disagree heavily on you because I have you at 2. I think 2 safest options at running back and receiver, which is a great place to start. And then you have a great wide receiver 2, solid running back 2. And I think the rest of the team is solid. I think there's not if flex 2 is kind of the weakness, which I don't even think it's a huge weakness. I think other teams have worse flex 2s. If that's like what you're kind of pointing out as a team's weakness, then I think you're in a great spot. I think you're going to have positional advantages, like 2 huge positional advantages every week, which is a huge thing. And so I view it too. I think that I think you can make the argument that it's your year, and I don't know how you could say otherwise.
I could make the argument of what?
That it's your year, and I don't know how you could say it's. I don't know how you could argue otherwise.
Well, let's see it, Joe. What? It's hard to argue that it's my year when it's literally hasn't even started yet. But I think my number 2 team is, I don't think, obviously, based on process of elimination, is your number 1 team. And that's Nick for me. He did a great job with his, obviously, really strong receiver depth and still has good running backs, along with a top end quarterback and an above average tight end. So really solid everywhere. I think he got better after the trade with Morgan. I like that move a lot, and I like his bench too. So for me, a really great job all around. The thing that keeps Nick from being number 1, in my opinion, is his running backs. I just don't think that Ezekiel Elliott and AJ Dillon is an elite group. I think it's average. But I can't put a team with average running backs number 1. So I got Nick as number 2.
I'm going Nick number 1. I think he is certainly living up to his team name. He is stacked this year. He is very stacked. Speaking of stacks, got the Justin Herbert, Mike Williams stack, which I don't think we mentioned. And I'm higher on the running backs. I think they're more than good enough to let the rest of his lineup shine. Just Devontae Adams, Mike Evans, AJ Brown, Mike Williams, just 4 great receivers, a solid running back duo, solid tight end, great quarterback, solid bench. Like, really, I don't really see a weakness here so far. So Nick is my preseason pick to win the Haney, or not the Haney, sorry, the DJ. I did it last year with him, picked him first overall, or picked him to finish first. I'm doing it this year. I just think his team is very, very good.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but I also picked my number 1 team as number 1 last year.
You did.
Which is Hunter. I've got Hunter number 1. Obviously, like I said, I can't put a team with what I graded as a C letter running backs number 1. But I can have a hard time putting a team with can have a hard time. That was very poorly worded. I would have a hard time putting a team with A+ graded running backs anywhere else but number 1. And so for me, that's Hunter. Derrick Henry, Aaron Jones, elite level duo. Josh Jacobs is a great running back 3 as well. And I think, he all the way down the board, great job with the running backs, and he got Justin Jefferson, and he got Kyler Murray. So I don't really see the argument how anyone is a better team than them. I do agree he's going to need to cut Hayden Hurst and pick up a real tight end. And I think that he might have trouble with his flex 2. But like you said earlier, flex 2 is something that you're concerned about, then obviously you're in a pretty good position. So I really like what Hunter's done. Oh, he's got Hunter Henry on his bench, so he already has a better tight end than Hayden Hurst. So yeah, overall, great job by Hunter. He's my number 1 team again.
Yeah, we're becoming a little predictable here. So I have Nick to win the DJ. Do you have Hunter?
Yes.
Okay, and then do we agree on the Haney? I have Ben.
I'll go Ben as well.
Yeah. So those are the power rankings. I'm sure there'll be a lot of fun again this year, especially all the week 1 overreactions we're gonna get to be able to do next week. And so yeah, this has gone on for way too long, and we will come back right after this break with an interview with Ben.
Just
So,
a couple more quick updates. I did update all the schedules, so the schedules are correct now and on ESPN. That's who you're actually playing in each week. And then also, I don't want to go without saying, because we've got to record a last podcast of last year. So congratulations, Joe, on your 3rd championship. I will work on getting some new stickers for the trophy, which kind of sucks for Grant because he had the trophy for 2 years without ever getting his name on it. But yeah, so congratulations to Joe. Great work. Also, obviously all sorts of scoring records and things from last year, which we already did talk about in a previous podcast. And then the last thing to address is that I think we need more merch at some point. So obviously we have the OG koozies. We could do another run of koozies, either the same ones or a new design, or I think shirts would be cool. Really, ultimately, I think a really cool thing would be patches. And that way we could have championship jackets. But yeah, so I am very open to any ideas for merch, and I have a job now, so I will be ready to jump on any merch opportunities. All right, we'll be back with Ben.
so now welcome in Ben as the first guest of the 2022 season of the podcast. We asked the league at the draft who they wanted as first guest to kind of talk about the draft and preview the season with. It was a unanimous decision on Ben. And so generally, I think we're just going to start with the draft, Ben, and just general strategy if there was one. And if there was one, what was it?
Well, what it really was ruined by Dan. Dan kind of screwed me up with my strategy there. Last year and this year, my strategy has been let y'all blow $80 on running backs on average, and then try to steal one here. And I ended up getting James Conner for $40, which I was pleased with, because at least that's a decent running back. So if anybody remembers last year, didn't have good running backs. And I think my starting running backs were Raheem Mostert and Myles Gaskin. Gaskin, I think, scored one time. He was allergic to the end zone, and Raheem Mostert has more glass legs than Christian McCaffrey does. So
He had a hell of a first play last year, though.
Yeah, but so that was kind of unfortunate. Did want Kyle Pitts for 35. That was not the plan. I tried to just bid it up, and then nobody outbid me, and I was like, "Oh shit, okay. I guess I'm stuck with them." But yeah, I wanted to hold my money and then get good value players around 5th to 6th round. And what ended up happening was, I believe, me, and then it was either Nick or Grant. One of those two also kind of held their money.
I think both of them kind of had.
Yeah, and so what ended up happening was I wasn't really as willing to pull the trigger and spend my money and give the advantage over to Dan. But eventually got to the point where I was like, okay, there's just nobody left. I've just got to do it. And then Dan still waited, and I was like, oh, okay, I'll take that. So I think I got out a little too late compared to where I should have. It's I don't know when y'all ended the draft, but I was done probably decently before everybody else. And so that's kind of been my strategy. And it worked out last year. It worked out well if I would have kept with my team and my running backs would have gotten hurt. I think I would have easily been a playoff team, because I think I was 7th last year. I was just one away from making the playoffs somehow, and ended up losing all 3 of my playoff games, which I think Yeah, so that was not great. But yeah, like I mean, obviously I made the blunder of trading away Cooper Cup, who was by far and away the best fantasy prospect out there that year. And like for pennies on the dollar. So that was a pretty bad thing. But I said, you know what, my draft strategy wasn't terrible last time. Let's try it again and see what we can do.
Yeah, if you would have kept Cup last year, because you really, I was just talking to Joe about this because I had forgotten that you almost snuck into the playoffs. Like you were one win, you had a must-win game the last week of the season to get in the playoffs, despite the trade. So yeah, if you had kept Cup, for sure you would have been in the playoffs, probably like a middle range seed too.
Well, I probably win 3 or 4 games if I have Cup, like extra games than what I actually won. So I'm probably a 4 seed or something like that, you know. And on top of that, I would have had Cup, Higgins, and Deontay Johnson, who were all like in the top 15 last year in terms of wide receivers. My running backs were garbage, but you know, if you have that kind of production out of your wide receivers, then you can kind of say screw running backs. Hopefully one of them gets in the end zone and let's see what happens. But yeah, this year it was kind of a lot of the same. I ended up going heavy wide receivers again. So hopefully I don't run into the issue. Fortunately, we have 2 flex spots, so I'm able to start 4 receivers. Hopefully I'm not running into the issue of where it's like, well, crud, which wide receiver do I start? Because I have so many that I think will do really well. For now, it's fine because like D-Hop is suspended, so I don't have to worry about him. But when he comes back, it's really going to be okay. Who has the best matchup? Who's trending well? I did drop Ayuk, and then somebody spent $91 on him. So I went and just picked up Boston Scott to kind of just handcuff Miles Sanders and Scott there, because I think Scott will have a little better of a time than Gainwell will. So,
former college classmate of yours?
Yeah, pretty much. DJ went to DJ's church, so you know, I've got insider information there, good repertoire. So
listen, if you're interested, we can talk about, if you're interested in Kenneth, we can talk about
yeah, get all 3. There you go. Maybe so. I'll have your people call my people.
Okay, sounds good.
Yeah.
So we just want to confirm this is important journalism we're doing. The league year challenge, the 11 beers, the 11 donuts had no impact on draft performance.
Honestly, no. Like when I hit like 9, I was like, crap, like this kind of sucks. But by the time that like I pretty much hit 9, and then when I got to 10, I just went and did 11 at the same time. And so by the time the draft rolled around, which was like when I started, it was 12 hours before. So by the time the draft rolled around, I was like, I had simmered down a little bit. But it was awful. Never again.
I think a big mistake. I think one of the smarter things Parker did with the 10 last year was the donut size. Like you went big on Mary Lee. Those are like bigger donuts. Parker went like with smaller ones from Krispy Kreme.
Mm-hmm. Well, okay. At first I was like, do I just like scam the hell out of them and go get like the powdered sugar donuts and just like count that as like donuts? But I was like, I don't know. They might not like that. So thought about it, but I was like,
I mean, the advantage, you know, Krispy Kreme, they're smaller, but they're more dense.
Yes.
So
that was Mary Lee's. Actually, the Mary Lee's wasn't the problem. That actually like came in clutch. It was like, wow, these are like really light, airy donuts. Like this is fine. And like I ate dinner like shortly thereafter. I was fucking hungry still. So after like a dozen donuts, I was like, damn, I'm fucking hungry. Like it's
after 3,000 calories of donuts and beer, went back.
Yeah, I was like, damn, I'm actually kind of hungry. Let's get some food. So
yeah, I'm impressed.
That ended up happening. I was surprised. I was like, that doesn't feel right. And then I just like felt awful and didn't want to eat or drink for like 5 days. So
yeah. So I think that's it for me for questions. And do you have anything else, Parker?
No, I just, you know, I think the questions, it's not me raising the questions, but overall, I want to know what's the mood of the fan base. It's been a long time. Ben, looks like since 2016, since you made a playoff appearance. You know, you went on a run last year. It looked like you'd get there. It looked like you wouldn't get there for a long time, but then, You know, people started to believe down the stretch, and it kind of didn't fall through. So, what's the mood of the fan base? What do you have to say to your fans who are maybe getting a little impatient after 5 seasons without making it to the postseason?
You know, forget about weeks 1 through 3. Those can historically don't matter. See if I can pull off a win in week 4 and 5. If I can come out the gate with 3 or 4 wins, that's you're looking for a pretty good season. It's a fairly young roster, fairly unproven roster at this point. Got a couple veterans holding it down, but there's a lot of upsides to the roster. I think it's a high ceiling, but also I think out of every roster, I think there's probably one of the lowest floors out of every roster. So that's kind of where it plays out when if they all hit, then I think it goes toe to toe, and it's probably the best roster out there, just in my opinion. If everybody hits on my team, I don't think that other people are going to beat me. But you know, if a couple people don't show up, then it could be danger. So
sounds like the plans ride out the beginning of the season. You know, any wins in the first 3 weeks are unexpected.
Oh no, I always win the first 3. I almost always win the first 3 weeks. That's the problem. It's the first 3 weeks I win, and then I go on like a 7-game losing streak.
Okay.
Between weeks like 4 and 10. So it's just like, So, you know, first 3 weeks, we're right where we want to be. Doesn't matter if we lose or we win. We're right where we want to be. And then hopefully, you know, 4 through 10, we get on a surge and win about 4 or 5 of those. We're right in playoff contention there. Hoping for playoffs this year. Because really, it doesn't matter where you seed in playoffs. You just got to make it. If you make it, then it's 1 week at a time. And so I think a lot of my team will be kind of in the upswing, right in the middle to late season. So if I can get to the playoffs, I think my team has a lot of upside. There'll be a lot of teams, a lot of the teams that they're on will be competing for playoff spots and competing for seeding. Except for let's see.
Kyle Pitts.
Yeah, I've got 2 Atlanta people, so they won't be anything. But the other ones, they should all be, except for maybe Cooper. I don't have a lot of faith in Cleveland this year. But other than that, every single one of those teams should be trying, you know, in a playoff race, still in a playoff hunt into the back half of the season. So they'll be doing everything they can there. So hoping to see good production this year. Hoping my wide receivers pan out. Spent a lot of time snatching those away, particularly Olave and Renfrow. I think those are going to be steals in this draft. Olave's unproven, but Renfrow now that he has Devontae Adams on the other side of him, it's like I think Las Vegas is going to have a pretty damn good year. So Renfrow, I think, is going to be sneaky good in fantasy. I don't think he'll have a Cooper Kupp year where he just balls out and drops 400 fantasy points or whatever, but I think he could easily eclipse 280, 290 on the year.
And then my last question, and maybe the most important question, is what do you have to say to Joe, who had the first selection of where he wanted to pick in the division draft, and he chose the first pick so that he could pick you to be in his division?
Brilliant choice.
What's the message to Joe after that complete sign of disrespect on the draft day?
Who's in the rest of the division?
Dan and Thomas.
Yeah.
What the hell did everybody else do? How did you get those 3?
I really like Thomas's team.
I do like Thomas's team, but no, just historically speaking, I mean, you probably have.
Dan's historically very good in the regular season.
Yeah.
I have similar questions. I don't know exactly how that happened because somehow the divisions ended up.
Well, I know Nick stacked his division.
Yeah.
And then made I don't even know how this trade. Okay, well, they went it back on it, but I was gonna say, if they actually went through, or did they go through with that trade?
Yeah, no, they did.
Yeah, him and Morgan.
I don't know what the hell that's about. I feel like Morgan literally just downgraded everywhere.
He needed a running back too, which you got a more reliable one.
Oh, but dude, I mean, I feel like you just to just ignore the pun, but he absolutely stacked Nick's roster. I don't know. Nick's team is infinitely more scary now that you have Herbert, AJ Brown, and Adams, it's like, dude, it, that's a scary team now.
Ben speaks from experience when it comes to getting too desperate on a trade for a running back. So
Yeah, that seems like that's a reach even for me. Like, I mean,
Yeah.
so I mean, we'll see if that one comes to bite him in the butt. But you know, I like Joe's division though. I mean, he's set himself up for winnable games. And I have a lot to prove this season, so you know, it's not a bad thing. But
Yeah.
I would not be surprised if I, you know,
You,
What's
you
my record
gotta
against
earn
Joe?
the first pick. You earn the first pick.
there you go. I earned the first pick for sure. I don't know what my record is against Joe, but I'm pretty sure it's like a 400. Maybe it's 350.
you are 9-5, or you were 5-9 against Joe.
Yeah, so about a 400.
350.
So,
Yeah. Well,
yeah,
yeah.
350. Right where I thought it was. And so, yeah, I mean, it's definitely not a bad pick if you're looking at
You know,
every year's different. So,
last year, week 3, the first rivalry week, 2 out of the 3 first-round picks in the division draft actually beat the team that drafted them. So statistically, you know, maybe you have a good shot.
yeah. I don't even know who's on your team, Joe. Let me see. What's your team name? Riding the luck.
But no, I gotta change that.
Yeah, you know, well, if Christian McCaffrey stays healthy throughout the season, then yeah, you got a good team. If he doesn't, then it's kind of ride or die. So, don't hate it because you actually got McCaffrey for decent money with $68. I think that's actually fairly low compared to how we normally spend our money in this league. So, but we'll see. I think you have less depth, but you got your starters are solid. You know,
I
So-
very much agree with that.
so if your starters stay healthy, but that's everybody's season. It's like, okay, who's spin the wheel of who the heck's going to get injured and whose fantasy season is just screwed because of it. But yeah, we'll have to wait and see.
All right. So let's go
So-
through. What's up, Joe?
We're gonna start the picks.
Oh yeah, let's do picks.
Okay, so yeah, we're gonna start with picks. I believe the highest projected point total for this week is Colin, who is projected 111.3. He's playing Thomas. He's a 4-point favorite. You know, Colin obviously coming off the great season, Thomas coming off a very strong draft. So, you know, I think this is a toss-up. Any thoughts on this one?
Well, first off, I think this is we didn't discuss this before, but I feel like we should just pick straight up this year instead of against the spread because our picks were so bad last year.
They were bad last year. Well, your pick, I was like average, and then you were terrible.
You were by far the best, and you were like 500.
Yeah.
And I
All
was
right,
like,
we can do straight up.
Yeah,
We can especially do straight up week 1 because nobody really knows anything.
yeah, let's do straight up. Straight up picks. Okay.
You want to go?
I'll take Colin. I think, you know, he made some decisions on draft day. We will have talked about that earlier in this podcast about maybe not the best, most efficient use of his funds in terms of having players that he can all play at the same time. But still, you know, the matchups are good. Josh Allen against the Rams, Thursday Night Football to start the season. That was a shootout last year with the Bucks and the Cowboys, and should be the same this year. So I'll take Colin in this one. You know, I think Thomas is gonna have a good team, but it's gonna take a little while for those running backs to earn their roles. So I'll take Colin straight up.
Ben?
Yeah, I'm looking. I gotta go with Colin's team right now. Just don't see Thomas's team being super hot out the gate. I see it being a solid team, but I think Colin's probably got it by probably double digits. I think Colin will probably win it by. So I think a lot of Colin's projected are actually undervalued. So
Okay, I'm actually gonna go the other way. I like Thomas's team as of right now. You know, I think you've got a little bit of correct cause for concern there, Parker, with Breece Hall maybe as the rookie getting you know, maybe not as the workload that he's going to see later in the season, but Colin, he still has Mahomes just sitting on his bench. He hasn't turned that into anything, and I don't really like his flexes that much. And so like top to bottom starting lineups, I like Thomas's team a little bit more. So I'm gonna take Thomas. So next is somebody's 111. There's like 2 teams 111. So next is Zach, who is projected 111.1. He's playing you, Ben. He's, you're projected 103.9. So Zach a heavy favorite or heavier favorite, but we're picking straight up. So I think in this one, or actually Ben, we'll let you go first. Get your thoughts out of the way on your matchup.
Let's see. I think I'm going to win this one. I think a lot of my projections are a little low. So I think I have I'm going to go out on a limb and just predict that Kyle Pitts reaches the end zone more than once this season. I think they'll probably be a pretty large target for the entire season for Atlanta. So I think he'll go get a touchdown. He's only projected 9, and I don't think that's the case, even though he's going to be against a stout Saints defense. I'm looking at my team. I think we're going to get more end zone, more pay dirt than is projected. So I'm going to go with my team here.
Okay. I disagree. I think I'm going to take Zach. I do like, this is before Saquon and Dalvin inevitably get hurt at some point in like the first 4 weeks. Antonio Gibson coming off of, Brian Robinson's shooting is a little more valuable now for Zach. And I kind of like Zach's team. So I'm going to take Zach here. And so Parker, you are break the tie.
I'm gonna go with the underdog. I'm gonna go with Ben here. I think that I like Zach's team a little bit more on the season, but for this first week, Matthew Stafford already said I think that game's gonna be a shootout, and so that should be a good number of points there. Saints defense going against Atlanta should be a lot of points. We'll see. Marcus Mariota being the starter doesn't exactly raise a lot of confidence, and then Zach's team, I think he does get a little bump from Antonio Gibson, like you mentioned, but I don't know. His matchups don't look quite as good to me, despite the fact that he's projected a lot more points. So I'm gonna go with Ben in this one. I'll take the underdog.
All right. So the next matchup will be Parker projected 111 playing last year's runner-up Grant projected 106.9. I can't imagine where Parker's gonna go with this. I'll let you start. I just cannot imagine who you're gonna pick in this matchup.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think this one is particularly close. I'm gonna go Grant. I think he runs away with it. I think my running back 2 position, obviously a big question mark. Grant's team, he does have some questions as well with J.K. Dobbins possibly being questionable for this one. But overall, I think I'm gonna take Grant by a landslide.
I'm gonna take you. I like your team more, as we previously discussed on the podcast. And like you're big on this Buffalo Rams game to start the year. You have 2 players in that. You got Jonathan Taylor, who's gonna have a great game script against the Texans. And I don't know if I'm there with Grant's team yet, and I'll just keep doubting him, and they'll just keep making championship games and winning, and that's going to be what it is. So, Ben, you are here to break the tie on this matchup.
I gotta go with Parker's team. I don't like Grant's matchups as much, even though he's got 2 Baltimore players going against the Jets. I like Parker's matchups a lot. I think Seattle is going to be an incredibly weak team this year. Houston's not going to be good. The Giants aren't going to be good. The only one where I'm like, Singletary may be a pretty poor running back 2 spot. It just depends how much he splits with the rookie. But I think Parker's team should run away with that one.
I agree. And next up will be Morgan going up against Hunter. Really good matchup here. Morgan projected 110.7, Hunter 109.2. Just kind of looking at it, I think me and Parker both love Hunter's team. I'm going to take Hunter. I'm not all the way there with Morgan's team. I think it's okay, but like you mentioned, Ben, I think he got a little bit worse with the trade he made. I'm just really high on Hunter's team. So, any thoughts here?
This one's kind of a coin flip here. It's really close. I'm actually going to go with Morgan's team on this one for the win out of week 1. I think Jalen Hurts might have a really big game against Detroit, and probably get a rushing touchdown just since he does run quite a bit. So I think we might see Morgan kind of pull away with this one. He's got a high-powered team, even though he did downgrade. I still think he's going to follow this one here.
I like Hunter here. As long as the 2 running backs are healthy, I probably won't pick against him. Derrick Henry, Aaron Jones, along with Justin Jefferson. Look at the first 4 names: Kyler Murray, Derrick Henry, Aaron Jones, Justin Jefferson. Just stop reading there. That team's winning 9 times out of 10. So I'm taking Hunter.
I agree. We move on. Second to last matchup here. I am playing Austin. I'm coming off of the first road back to to defending my championship, Austin, after a terribly unlucky points against year last year, trying to turn things around this year. Unlike Parker, I'm not afraid to take myself. I do like Austin's team quite a bit. But this is, I think Christian McCaffrey, this is before he gets injured. So he's good before he gets injured. And then Travis Etienne, I really like, especially with James Robinson coming off an Achilles. And then, CeeDee Lamb with all those vacated targets and Dallas. I like my team as of week 1. And we're gonna have to get lucky with injuries as the season goes on, but that's not what I'm picking here. So I will pick myself in week 1 to beat Austin.
I agree. I like you this week, Joe. I think, like you said, your team's healthy coming into the season. Austin has a couple of question marks. Cam Akers, he's been banged up. He's coming back from the Achilles injury. I like to see how that sorts out. Same thing with Michael Thomas. As we all know, as Louisiana locals, have a lot of question marks about that guy, and I'm gonna need to see it to believe it. So I'm gonna take you this week.
I'm also going to go Joe. I don't like the kind of reliance on Dak and CeeDee Lamb scoring a decent amount of points there, but I think you have a lot more consistency on your side than Austin does at the moment. A lot of unproven there. So I got to go with Joe here.
Okay, that definitely won't backfire against me. And the last matchup is Nick against Dan. And it is actually a projected tie as of recording, 106 to 106. And so we'll start with Ben on this one.
Looking at the 2 teams, I'm going to have to go with Nick's team here. I think Nick's team is a little undervalued here. Dan's running backs, I just don't think are going to cut it at all as 1 or 2. I don't think either of those running backs are even necessarily a running back 2, even though they're starting running backs. Now I may not be the best go-to on what a good running back is, but I'm not, until they prove it, I've got to go with Nick's team here.
I agree with your analysis of Dan's running backs. Big question mark there. Nick, I do think he got a little better with this trade. But I'm going to take the over here. 212, sort of a low line. I think that with these 2 teams, we should see more than 212 points in 2022 fantasy football. That's a low number. So I'll take the over.
It is appropriate for Nick's matchup to take the total. I agree with Ben. I'm going to take Nick. I think he improved this week. It will be interesting. His top 2 receivers are guys in new situations with new quarterbacks. But I just think top to bottom, really like this team. 4 great wide receivers. I think a pretty undervalued, solid running back duo, and a good tight end, a great quarterback. There's not much to dislike about Nick's team, and I've got a few questions with Dan's team, to say the least. So I'm going to take Nick here pretty handily, especially if it's a pick 'em. So so that's the pick 'em for this week. Can't imagine we'll do any worse than last year, but you never know. Well, and we appreciate Ben for joining, and might talk to you again later in the year if the team makes a playoff push. We'll see. And so so thanks for tuning in this week, and we will see you I'll see you next week. Maybe Parker will, maybe Parker won't, who knows. But yeah,
This telecast is copyrighted by the NFL for the private use of our audience. Any other use of this telecast or of any pictures, descriptions, or accounts of the game without the NFL's consent is prohibited.
We're back. Well, it's Monday night. A new week has begun. I turn on my TV for some pigskin fun. I see a Super Bowl season here on ABC. The biggest game each week is their specialty. I gotta get ready, make everything right. Monday Night Football's coming on tonight. Are you ready? Are you ready? Are you ready? We're ready. Are you ready for some football? A Monday night party. Hey, this is rockin' random, Hank. Ready to get the good time started. We've got the teams on the field and we turned up the lights. All my rowdy friends are back for Monday night time. Watches this primetime show. New York, Nashville, San Francisco. We love to watch the kickoff as the game begins. Pretty cheerleaders and last-minute wins. The screaming crowd and the linebackers stare. Scrambling quarterbacks and receivers in the air. Big hits are coming, the backs are cutting inside. Everybody turns it up Monday night.